Hello, I will continue to talk about the rules of chess. I will start with the progress of the game. The player with the white tools is the first to play. Each player in turn moves one of the tools in his possession. Only one tool except in the case of castling. As I have already explained to you, that in the case of castling you actually move two tools at the same time, and it is considered as one move only. You move the king and the rook, and this is the castling or small castling, or you can also do the long castling when you move the king and then the rook, and it is considered as one move only. Okay, each tool has its own unique way of moving, and so on until a decision is made. The player can move any piece in turn and move it wherever he wants, provided that he doesn't violate the rules for moving the pieces. Also, if a center player's king is exposed to a threat from an opponent's piece, a situation known check, the player must do everything in his power to eliminate this situation. Okay, so if the black in this situation threatens check on the white king, the white must eliminate the threat of check immediately. If he fails to eliminate the threat, he will lose the game. Instead, in a state known as checkmate, and any move that doesn't result in removing the threat of check will be illegal. Okay, so in this position, if the white, for example, moves his pawn, it is a state of check, then this move is an illegal move. Why? Because the white king is in the threat of check, and he cannot do any other move than removing the threat of check. So this move is an illegal move. Okay, so the white must eliminate the threat of check. For example, he can do this move, and in doing this move he actually blocked the threat of check, or he blocked the line of the attack. This is one option, and he also can move the king to square that he is not threatened. Can also move here, here, here. Okay. In addition to this, any move that would immediately result in the plane of player's king being in a check is also illegal. So, for example, in this position, it is illegal to move the king to g4, because in g4 it will be threatened by the other bishop. So you must not move your king to a square that it will be threatened by the opponent's tool. The king is the only piece that must not be deliberately placed under the threat of check by another piece. Okay, now I will explain the rules of beating. If one of the opponent's pieces stands in the way of the moving piece, he can eat it, provided it is a legal move. Okay, so in this position, as I've already told you, the bishop moves diagonally, so in each way there is a pawn, so it can eat this pawn like this. Unlike in checkers, for example, eating is a right and not an obligation. Okay? By eating another tool, it means removing it from the board and placing the eating tool in its place. So I've already showed you, the black bishop eats the white pawn, so we will remove the white pawn and place the black bishop in the place of the white pawn. The king cannot be beaten. Okay? So if you threaten check, if the black threatens check in the white king, then the white must react immediately to that threat, and if it does, if another move that is not removing immediately the threat of check, then it will be illegal move, and actually you must cancel the illegal move and notify your opponent that is in a check position, and he must eliminate the check threat immediately. It is customary to declare in a situation where he is exposed to a threat and cannot be defended for checkmate. For if, for example, the black side makes a threat to the white side, a threat to the king of the white side, and the white cannot remove or eliminate the threat immediately, then the black can declare a checkmate. That means that he won the game. For example, I will show you a checkmate situation. So this position is a checkmate position. Actually, the black checkmated the white side, or the black made a mate. You can say checkmate or mate. The black checkmated his opponent because the black bishop threatens a check on the white king, and the white cannot eliminate the threat of check because he cannot move to the square g4 because he will be threatened by the pawn f5, and he cannot move to the square f4 because then he will be threatened by the pawn g5, and he cannot go to square e4 because he will be threatened by the pawn f5 and also by the bishop that is on d5. And the white cannot hit the pawn because the pawn is protected by the pawn d4. So actually the black won the game in this position. Okay, so all tools eat according to their movement. For example, the bishop will only eat on its diagonally. Okay, as I have already showed you, the bishop can eat that pawn because the bishop moves diagonally, and he also eats diagonally. So if in its way of moving there is an opponent's tool, he can eat that tool. He can eat this tool like that, and also the rook moves straight, and if in his way there is an opponent's tool, he can eat the tool. In this position, for example, the black rook can eat this pawn like that. The same thing is correct about the knight. The knight eats in the same way that he moves. So the knight can move to c2 or to a2, and if there is an opponent's piece on the tool that the knight can move, he can eat that tool. So he can eat the pawn on c2 like this, or he also can eat the pawn on a2. Why? Because he can move to a2, so he can eat also on a2. Can eat the pawn on a2. The same thing is correct also about the queen. The queen moves, the queen eats exactly as the way it can move. It can move diagonally or straight. So in this position, because of the fact that the king can move also diagonally, it can eat diagonally, so it can eat the white knight that is on square a5. Okay, the only exception that we have is the pawn. The pawn doesn't eat at the same way that he moves. The pawn moves forward, and eats diagonally one square diagonally. So I will give you an example for that. The pawn can move forward. He moves always forward. If in the second row for the white, he can move 2 squares, or if the pawn is in the 7th row for the black side, he also can move 2 squares. But as far as we relate to eating, yes, the white can move. The pawn eats diagonally like this. So the pawn moves forward and eats diagonally in the forward direction. Okay? So the pawn moves forward but eats diagonally. And a special case of beating is beating through each movement or en passant rule. Okay? I will show you, I've already showed you the rule. I will explain now briefly what is en passant rule, and then I will explain it in detail. If the white side in this position moves 2 squares, then the black side has the right to eat the pawn that moves 2 squares like this. Okay, I will explain it later in detail. Okay, now I will talk about the stages of the game. The first stage of the game is the opening. The first stage of the game is the opening. At this stage, the player develops his tools, which are blocked behind the row of pawns, in order to allow them to control the center of the board and threaten the opponent's defense. The opening phase also includes the evacuation of one of the sides in order to allow the castling. Yes, so you will evacuate the pawn and the bishop in this side in order to do the small castling, and also you will evacuate the knight on the pawn on the queen side in order to do the big castling. The same thing applies to the black side, of course. The castling aims to fortify the king in a corner and keep him away from the exposed center. A typical opening usually involves a double jump with the king or queen's pawn. So this is the king's pawn. You will move it 2 squares forward. The black can do the same thing, and then taking out 1 or 2 knights, you will take the knight out of the starting point, and taking out 1 or 2 bishops. Then you can take out your bishop, and then castling. Then the white can do the small castling. Then the black can develop his knight. The white can do this move, and then the black can also do a small castling. There are openings called gambits, in which one of the sides sacrifices material, usually pawn, in order to take control of the center. Okay, I'll show you an example of the opening of Queen's Gambit opening. Queen's Gambit is when the white starts with the queen's pawn, and also the black do the same thing, and then the white moves pawn c2 to c4, and actually in this position the white sacrifices the pawn on c4 in order to gain control on the center of the board. If the black takes the pawn, then the white can do the move pawn e2 to e4, and actually, as you can see, in this position the white sacrificed a pawn in order to gain control of the center of the board. In this position, the white controls the squares f5, e5, d5, and c5. Okay. The number of openings is large, and the number of tier variants is even larger. Professional players memorize many openings in order not to make mistakes at the beginnings of the game, which will give an early advantage to the opponent. So we finished to talk about the first phase or first stage of the game, the opening. Now I talk about the second phase, that is the middle game. The middle game took place after most of the tools have already been developed, and the battle is at its most intense in the center of the board, usually while exchanging tools and trying to break the other side's pawn alignment. At this stage, it is possible to implement a large number of tactics to accumulate a material and positional advantage. So there are a lot of tactics for the middle game that I will not talk on them on this lecture. Okay, so we finished to talk about the middle game. Now I will talk about the third stage, that is the end game. This stage happens when a large number of tools exchanges have been made without a decisive advantage being gained for any side. This stage usually includes a small number of pieces for each side. It might be king, knight or bishop, rook, and pawns, and in which the players try to overwhelm each other, usually by crowning one of the pawns to a heavy piece, such as a queen. So I will give you an example for endgame. So this is a position of endgame. The white side will try to advance his pawn on a6 to the eighth row and replace the pawn to a queen. This process is called crowning, and the black side will try to prevent it and to make a checkmate on the white king. Okay. Or this is also a position of endgame. Actually, it is in this position it is a draw because the black side, even though it has a rook against bishop, it cannot mate the white king because the white side has a bishop, and this game will end in a draw. Okay, at that point the threat in checkmate to the king is small, and therefore the king becomes an active tool, protecting the pawns and supporting their progress towards the 8th row. Okay, because the end game requires precise play, many players carefully study common end games positions. Okay, so we finished to talk about the 3 stages of the game. Now I will talk about the special moves and situations in the game, and I will start with en passant rule. Okay, when a pawn makes a 2 steps advance from its standing position and there is an opponent's pawn on a square next to the destination square on an adjacent file, so this is the position that if the white pawn makes an 2 square step, 2 square move, and there is an adjacent pawn on the square d4, then the opponent's pawn can capture it according to en passant rule. Moving to the square, the pawn passed over. Okay, so the black can capture the pawn that moves 2 squares like this. This can be done only on the terrain immediately following the opponent's pawn to square advance. Otherwise, the right to do so is forfeited. So, in this position, if the white side advance his pawn 2 squares forward, then the black side has the right to hit the pawn that advanced 2 squares forward like this. And the right to hit the pawn like this is only valid immediately. You cannot do it later. Only immediately after the white moved his pawn 2 squares forward. If the black side does another move, then he actually forfeited his right to hit the pawn that advanced 2 squares forward according to en passant law or according to en passant rule. So he can no more, when he advances king, he can no more hit the pawn e4 according to en passant rule. Okay. So we finished to talk about the en passant rule. Now I will talk about castling. In the game of chess, the castling is a joint move of the king and the rook that is considered as one move and is carried out in 2 stages. The king moves 2 squares towards the rook, like this. And the first stage is that the rook moves to the square after its king. This is the small castling, and in the long castling it is the same process. The king moves 2 squares towards the rook, and then the rook moves 2 squares, the rook moves actually before the king. There are 5 conditions that must be met in order to perform a castling. So, in order to do castling, there are 5 conditions that must be met. Okay, the first condition is that the king and the rook didn't move at all from their starting squares. So, in this position, if the rook moved during the game to h4, for example, and then comes back to h1, so the white actually lose his right to do the small castling. Why? Because the rook has already moved. The same rule is for the other rook. If he moved during the game to a5 and then come back to a1, then the white side cannot do the big castling because the rook a1 has already moved. And the same rule is about the king. If the king moved during the game and then comes back to its starting point, then in this position the white side actually lose his right to do castling. He cannot do small castling, and he cannot do also the long castling. Why? Because the king has already moved. Okay, so the first condition to do the castling is that the king didn't move from its starting point, or if you want to do small castling, then the rook h1 isn't moved from the beginning of the game, and in order to do the big castling, it is allowed only if the rook a1 didn't move at all from the beginning of the game. Okay, so that is the first condition to do the castling. The second condition is that the king is not in a chess threat at that moment. So for example, in this position the king is in a threat of check by the black bishop. So in this position the white side cannot do castling at all. He cannot do small castling, and he cannot do also the long castling. Why? Because the king is in a chess threat. So whenever your king is in a chess threat, in a check threat, you are not allowed to do castling at all. Okay, so that is the second condition to do the castling. And the third condition that must be met in order to do castling is that the king will not be found in the threat of check at the end of the castling. So for example, in this position the white side is not allowed to do the small castling. Why? Because after it does the small castling, it will be in a check threat by the black bishop. So that is the reason that he is not allowed to do the small castling, because after the castling he is in a check threat by the black bishop. But he is allowed to do the big castling. So if your king will be in a check position after the castling, then you are not allowed to do the castling. Okay? And the fourth condition that must be met in order to do the castling is that the king doesn't move past a square threatened by the opponent's piece. So in this position, the white is not allowed to do the small castling. Why? Because if he do the small castling, he will have to pass through a square that is threatened by the black bishop. So the small castling is not allowed. Okay? But he is allowed to do the big castling. And the fifth condition that must be met in order to do castling is that there are no tools that separate the king from the rook. So in this position, the white is not allowed to do the small castling. Why? Because there is a white knight that separates between the king and the rook. But the white is allowed to do the big castling. Okay? And in this position, the white is not allowed to do castling at all. Why? Because there is a white bishop that separates between the rook and the king, and there is a white knight that separates between the king and this rook. Okay? If only one of the rook has been moved, it is still possible for the other rook to be used for castling. If the square adjacent to the rook is threatened, it is not possible to make a small castling. So in this position, the square that adjacent to the rook is threatened by the black bishop, so it is not allowed to do the small castling. According to condition number 3, that the king will not be found in the threat of check at the end of the castling. So he cannot do the small castling. Why? Because he will be found in the threat of check by the black bishop after the castling. But in this position, he can do the big castling. Even if the rook itself is threatened and the condition mentioned above are met, it is allowed to do to castle. So in this position, the rook a1 is threatened by the bishop, the black bishop, and even though you are allowed to do the big castling. Okay? And in this position, the rook on h1 is threatened by the black bishop, and even though that there is a threat to the white bishop to the white rook, it is allowed to do the small castling. So if your rook is threatened before the castling, you can't do the castling, you can castle. Okay? According to the rules of the game, to make the castling, the king must be moved first and then the rook must be moved. Taking the rook before moving the king means a move where only the rook moves. So in this position, if it is white side and you want to castle, you must first of all touch the king and move it, and then touch the knight and move. The same thing is, it is the small castling, and the same thing applies to the big castling. When you castle, you must first of all take the king and move it 2 squares towards the rook, and then take the rook and move it before the king. So the order is, first of all, in order to castle, first of all you move the king, and only after that you move the rook. That is the rule of castling. But if you touch the rook, then you cannot castle in this move. You must move the rook to any square that is allowed according to the rules of moving, and you are not allowed to do a castling. Why? Because if you want to castle, first of all, you must touch the king and move it, and only after that you will move the rook. The same rule is for big castling. If you touch, first of all, the rook, A1, you are not allowed to do big castling, and you must move with the rook to any square that is allowed to move according to the rules of moving. So if you touch the rook, you are not allowed to do big castling at all. The castling is an important move in the early stages of the game, because it serves two important purposes. First of all, it moves the king to a more protected place. So if you do the small castling, the king is moved to a more protected place than the center of the board where the battle started. And the second thing is that it takes the rook out of the corner and into a better attacking position in the center of the board. So you move the rook to a more center place. In this state position, the rook actually controls the column F that is very close to the center of the board, and if you do the big castling, actually the rook is controls on column D that is in the center of the board. Okay, so we finished to talk about the castling. Now I will talk about decision. Check refers to the situation where one of the players attacks his opponent's king. Okay? This position is a check position because the black bishop threatens check on the white king. That is, the king stands in a situation where in the next move he will be taken if no action is taken. So theoretically, if in this position, actually it is white's terrain, and theoretically if he does an illegal move, then theoretically the king can be taken by the black side. So that is the meaning of check position. Although that these moves are illegal, theoretically when you threat your opponent's king in a check, that means that in the next turn the king can be eaten by your opponent's king, your opponent's tool that threatens the king. That is the meaning of the threat of check. The threat of check, so it is that you threaten on your opponent's king to be eaten in the next turn if no action is taken by him. In a check position, the attacked king side must cause the check position to stop in any possible way. So in this position, the black side threatens check on the white king, so the white must eliminate the check immediately. Whether by eating the attacking piece. So, for example, in this position there is a check threat to the white king, and the white actually can eat the attacking piece that threatens the king by doing this move. So that is one possibility to eliminate the check, the threat of check by the black bishop. or by blocking the path of the attack. So it can block the path the attack, or it can block the line of the attack. The line of the attack is diagonally, and it can block the line of the attack by moving the pawn e2 to e4. Okay, so this is the second possibility to eliminate the threat of check by the black bishop. And the third option to eliminate the threat of check by the bishop is by moving the king. So you can move the king to here, or here, or here, or here, or here. Okay? So actually you have only three options when your king is the threat of check. Either you can eat the piece that threatens check on your king, or you can block the path of the attack, or the third option is that you can move the king to a square that is not threatened. Okay? But it must not be moved to the square that is being attacked. So in this position, the black bishop threatens a check on the white king. The white is not allowed to go to g3. Why? Because he is attacked by the black rook. He is not allowed also to go to g4 for the same reason, because in the square g4 is also attacked by the rook on g8. So you are not allowed to move your king to a square that is attacked by your opponent's tool. Okay? If none of these three actions are possible, the situation is called checkmate, a situation in which the king cannot defend himself at all. Okay? So, checkmate occurs when there is a threat to the king, a threat of check to the king. This is the first condition that must be met in order to perform checkmate. Like this position, there is a threat of check by the black bishop. The king cannot escape to any place that it is not under attack. in this position, actually, this is a position of checkmate because the king is under the threat of check by the bishop c6. So we met the first condition, and the king cannot escape to any place that is not under attack. So the king cannot escape to e3 because in e3 is under the attack of the other bishop. The same thing is correct about moving to e4. He is not allowed to move to e4 because he is in the threat of check by the bishop c6. He is not allowed to move to f4 because in f4 he is under the attack of the pawn e5, and he is not allowed to move to g3 or g4 because in this squares he will be under the attack of the black rook. Okay, so all and the third condition that must be met in order to perform a checkmate is that there is no tool that can protect the king. In this position, there is no tool that can protect the king. The two rooks cannot protect the king. The knight cannot protect the king from the threat of the check of the black bishop, and this bishop on e2 cannot protect the threat of check. And also the pawns cannot protect the king. So this is a situation of checkmate. The black side did a checkmate to the white side and won the game. Okay, all three conditions must be met in order to do checkmate. All three conditions. Condition 1, there is threat to the king. If there is no threat to the king, there is no checkmate. For example, in this position, if it is white's turn, the white cannot escape, cannot go anywhere, because any square that he will go, he will be threatened either by the black pawn or the by king. Cannot go to e1, he cannot go to c1 because of the threat of the black pawn. He cannot go to e2, or he cannot go also to c2 because of the black king. And there is no tool that can protect the king, so because there is no tools on the board. So we made condition 2 and 3. Condition 2 is that the king cannot escape to any place that he is not under threat. So we made condition 2, and we made condition 3 there is no tool that can protect the king. But we don't meet condition 1. Condition 1 is that there is a threat to the king. Condition 1 is not met because in this position there is no threat to the king's side, to the white side. The black is not threatening in check the white king, so condition 1 is not met, and therefore the black isn't win the game. Actually, it is a stalemate or it is a draw position. So this position is a draw because condition 1 that says that there must be a threat to the king is not met, because there is, in this position, there is no threat to the white king. So because of the fact that condition 1 is not met, there is no checkmate. As I have already told you, all three conditions must be met in order to do checkmate. And in this position, condition 1 is not met, so there is no checkmate. So this is a draw or stalemate. Okay? All three conditions must be met in order to perform checkmate. Okay? Whoever managed to checkmate won the game. Also, there are several rules that regulate the matter of check. The player must not make a move so that his king is threatened by check. I've already shown you the example of this. In this situation, the white must not move. He cannot move his king to square e2. Why? Because in square e2 is threatened by the black bishop. So you are not allowed to move your king to a place that is threatened by your opponent's tool. Okay, and when he is in a check position, he must cause the check position to stop if possible. Any other move in a check position is illegal. That thing that I've already explained it. If the opposing player is not paying attention to the check and makes an illegal move, his king must not be hit, and his attention must be drawn to the fact that he is threatened by the check. So, for example, in this position, if the white moves his pawn from h2 to h4, it is an illegal move because the black threatens check on the white king by the bishop. So the illegal move is cancelled, and the white must make another move in its place in order to eliminate the check threat. So we cancel the illegal move, and the white must eliminate the threat of check by the black bishop. For example, he can take the black pawn. Okay. Now I will talk about 4 types of check. The first type of check is a direct check. Moving a piece so that it threatens the opponent's king by itself, called direct check. So in this position, if it is black's turn, the black can move his bishop to b4 and to create a check to the white king. So if you move a tool and that tool itself threatens check on the king, it is called a direct check. Okay, we can also, in this position, if it is black's turn, the black can move his rook and threaten check on the white king. So he moved the rook, and the rook itself threatens check on the white king. This is a direct check. When the tool you move threatens check on your opponent's king, you actually did a direct check on your opponent's king. Moving a piece so that it opens a line of attack for the piece standing behind it to face the opposing king is called indirect check. In this position, if it is black's turn, it can move his bishop, and by moving his bishop to b5 actually created indirect check by the black rook. So when you move a tool, and by moving the tool you actually do an exposed check by another tool, this move is called indirect check. So in this position, the black moves his bishop and performs check by the rook. This is indirect check. Another example, if it is black's turn, then he can move his pawn from b4 to b3 and perform indirect check by the black bishop. Okay, so you moved the pawn and created check by the bishop. Okay, so this is the indirect check. The third type of check is the combination of the indirect check and direct check together, and it is called a double check. Moving a piece so that it itself threatens the opponent's king and at the same time opens a line of attack against the opponent's king for the piece standing behind it, that is a combination of direct check and indirect check in one move. It's called double check. So, for example, in this position, if it is black's turn, he can move his bishop from d7 to b5 and perform a double check. Why? Because the bishop itself threatens a direct check on b5 on the white king, and by moving the bishop to b5 he actually created indirect check by the black rook on d8. So when you move one tool, that each tool itself threatens a direct check, and at the same time by moving that tool you created also indirect check, that is a double check. Okay, so the combination of indirect check and direct check at the same time in one move is called double check. So a double check is exactly what it sounds like. A king is put in a check by two pieces. Yes, with a single move. With a single move. Double check almost always occurs with a discovered check or discovered attack. So by moving the bishop to b5, you actually created discovered attack or discovered check by the bishop, by the rook, the black rook. Where the piece moves, the bishop moves and exposes new attack by a previously blocked piece, that is the black rook. So when you moved the black bishop, you created another threat by the blocked rook. Okay? So that is the third type of check, and the last type of check is a cross check. There is also a type of check known as cross check, when a player responds to a king threat with counter check while blocking his opponent's check. So, for example, in this position, the black threatens check by the black rook on the white king, and when the white moves, for example, to d1, then from one side he escapes from the check, and from the other side he created a counter check by the white bishop. Okay, so if you are in a check position like this position and you escape the check from one side and create a counter check to your opponent's king, then this position, this check is called a cross check. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.